Upon review of Officer Butterfield's body-worn camera, it was determined that a criminal investigation would be necessary. During the course of the internal investigation, Officer Butterfield resigned, and that was June 12th. The criminal investigation continued, and Mr. Butterfield was ultimately charged with one felony count of tampering with evidence. Mr. Butterfield turned himself into the Indian River County Sheriff's Office on June 19th and was released on a $10,000 bond. The internal investigation is still ongoing, so please understand that we have a parallel internal investigation that will be completed soon, but this is mainly on the criminal investigation and the arrest of. On June 1st, 2024, at approximately 1:18 a.m., Officer Christian Butterfield conducts a traffic stop in the 2200 block of 16th Avenue on a white Chevrolet Malibu. Upon initial contact, Officer Butterfield approaches the driver's side of the vehicle and explains the reason for the traffic stop. Officer Butterfield explains to the driver, who is 19 years of age, that when the vehicle drove past his location on US 1, he could smell the odor of marijuana coming from the vehicle. He and another officer were apparently clearing a call for service and were standing along the roadside when the vehicle passed. Officer Butterfield then removes both occupants from the vehicle. The driver is asked to stand in front of Officer Butterfield's patrol vehicle. After refusing to identify himself, Officer Butterfield places the front seat passenger, 17 years old, in handcuffs and is placed in front of his patrol vehicle. Officer Butterfield then proceeds to search the vehicle. He removes a small black case from underneath the driver's seat and places it on the front seat. Within the case is what appears to be a couple of marijuana joints and a pack of rolling papers. Officer Butterfield continues to search the vehicle and locates a clear bag of what appears to be marijuana from the front compartment and places it on the front seat as well. Officer Butterfield states, "He's got this lockbox in there. I have no idea what it's filled with, but I have well over 20 grams of weed." So there's a felony. Officer Butterfield then walks to the rear of his patrol vehicle and opens the trunk. The bag of marijuana, the vape pen, and the small black case is in Officer Butterfield's hand. Officer Butterfield retrieves a small digital scale from his trunk and places it on the trunk lid along with the items in his hand. Officer Butterfield then utters, "Hit the magic number here." Officer Butterfield then places the bag of marijuana on the top of the digital scale. Officer Butterfield places the digital scale, bag of marijuana, vape pen, and the small black case in the left rear of the trunk. Officer Butterfield then places a black backpack over all the listed items and secures the trunk. Officer Butterfield makes a brief phone call while on scene to the on-duty supervisor with no mention of the marijuana. The traffic stop was from 1:18 a.m. to 2:02 a.m., which is approximately 44 minutes. Mentioned in the call for service report is 2 detained at 1:33 a.m., 1 male 10:15, which means arrest, at 1:45 a.m., and at 1:53 a.m. disregard the arrest, the 10:15. At one point, Officer Butterfield states, "I don't want to do this anymore, I just want to go and have fun." At approximately 2:04 a.m., Officer Butterfield arrives at the southwest corner of the police department parking lot, just over to this side. Officer Butterfield parks his car close to the dumpster, exits his vehicle, and opens the trunk. He then retrieves the bag of marijuana in the small black case and places both items into the dumpster. He goes back to the trunk and retrieves the vape pen and discards it in the dumpster as well. Officer Butterfield worked the rest of the weekend, which was Saturday and Sunday, as scheduled. His last shift ended at 6 a.m. on June 3rd. An offense report related to the traffic stop was not done, and none of the items had been placed into evidence. Vero Beach PD General Order 7 gives officers procedural guidelines to alternatives to arrest. This does not give officers discretion regarding felonies. General Order 102 states all narcotics, dangerous drugs, and/or paraphernalia seized by members of the department shall be submitted into evidence prior to the end of shift. I'll take any questions you have at this time.
What prompted the initial into this traffic stop? Because I saw in your report that there were some issues that he wasn't writing up his reports at the end of his shift. Is that what prompted it, or you just had a hunch?
His supervisor was noticing recently, just prior to that he was making traffic stops and wasn't necessarily doing the documentation that comes with that traffic stop, where even if it's a warning, it would be a written warning, not just a verbal warning, and there was a pattern there. So in his words, he was on his radar maybe a week or so prior to this incident, and then that night, understanding the time he was there, getting bits and pieces. It was a Friday night. They were busy. The sergeant was busy. He actually had his corporal at one time trying to get over to him. That prompted his interest once more, the incident itself, on the 1st. And then on Sunday, when they came into work, the two supervisors, they reviewed the video. And that's when they found the information, forwarded to the offense, Lieutenant Harrelson, who's over our patrol, and Deputy Chief Monaco. And that's when I came into work that morning and was notified as well.
So there weren't any other prior issues other than he's not submitting his reports at the end of the day?
Prior issues as far as
before this, was there anything?
No, he had been hired in October of 23. Hadn't been with us too terribly long, but no.
So are you guys continuing investigations to see if prior to this incident and prior to when you guys first got notice of, okay, maybe we need to keep him on the radar, are you guys looking into other possible incidences that he might have kind of done something similar?
Yeah, and we are, and we need to. Unfortunately, let me preface and say that this is not a good day. As a police chief and someone who's been here many years, and fortunately the chief for almost 13 years, this is the last thing that I want to do, that we want to do as an agency and as a city, is have to arrest somebody, let alone terminate them. So it's not a good day, but we have to see this through as long as there's video available. We went through several hours of video to realize and find out that he had discarded it in the dumpster back here to the corner.
Chief, some say, why not suspend him, reprimand him? Why fire him?
Well, he committed a crime. He violated general order. He did the same thing that we arrest other people for, that we arrest civilians for tampering with evidence, destroying evidence, and he resigned via email, as mentioned on the 12th. So certainly a suspension wasn't in order.
Now, a question for you. He says he had the evidence in his hand, the marijuana, that little black case. What could he have done? This person was saying they don't want to go to jail, but you said that there's other options that he could have taken. What are those options? Can you spell them out just a little bit more clearly? Well,
some of the alternatives to arrest are misdemeanors for the most part. Again, we were in a felony over 20 grams of marijuana that he weighed, and you heard the statements I made. So the alternatives to arrest are mostly with Baker Act type scenarios, misdemeanor type cases, and even like traffic violations that are criminal in nature, suspended license, things like that. So that's where we have leeway with misdemeanors mostly. But I can tell you this, that if he, during his conversation with his sergeant that evening, said, "Sarge, can you come over here? I've got this. For whatever reason, I don't want to arrest him, although I placed him under arrest. I want to unarrest him. But we're still going to do that offense report. We're still going to take the drugs and the paraphernalia and place it into evidence as required." It certainly would have been a different outcome. To your point too, Greg, every time we swear an officer in right here in this very room, and I swore him in October of 2023, so it wasn't too terribly long ago, every time we talk, and I talk about this right here, the police badge, because we pin it on them that day, a family member does, and they're sworn in by our city clerk. And what we talk about? We talk about integrity, character, and honesty, and trustworthiness. And there's an oath in office that we raise our hand, our right hand, and it talks about public trust and the faith that the public has in us, and we have to maintain that. So unfortunately, the arrest was made in conjunction with working with the state attorney's office and ultimately having the warrant signed by a judge. And again, that's nothing we want to do. But people are arrested for that daily throughout our county, our state, our country for the same type of crime. We have to hold ourselves accountable. We will do that. We are held to a higher level, a standard, and you all know that. So again, unfortunately, that's where we're at.
And he knew what to do with the evidence, right? I assume when you're
Absolutely.
training, he knew where the evidence was supposed to go.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we, with the general orders I explained, and there's some other that even are germane, if you will, but every officer signs off on their general orders. We're accredited an agency. That's how we have our general orders, how we do things, how we operate, standard procedures, and every officer has to sign off saying they've read them and understand them, and he did just that.
And then, as far as when this unarrest was made, if I remember correctly, was he alone? He was with another officer? Is that what you
Yeah,
mentioned?
there was two other officers that did arrive on scene at a certain point. They don't
anything-
ride together. He made the traffic stop, but then there were two other officers.
So does anything come of them in this situation, or I'm just curious, like what role they play into all of this?
Right. So remember I said there's an internal investigation that hasn't been completed yet? That's where we are in that regard.
Got it.
Yes, ma'am.
So the former officer, Butterfield, has he said why he did it at all?
He
said
never
anything?
offered a statement. No, he did not.
How much over marijuana was it?
It was over 20 grams, and it was 27 grams. You know, we got some different numbers, but I believe it was close to 27 grams. And again, over 20 is felony. It was a zippy bag. I remember seeing it myself on the camera, decent sized zippy bag full with marijuana.
Did Butterfield and the driver know each other, or did he know the passenger?
No. Not to our knowledge. Never understood that.
Some in the community gonna stick up for him, say, hey, we need more officers like this to give the kids a break on these marijuana charges, because the law is kinda lax on marijuana because of him, I believe.
Well, that hemp is like the .03 and lower.
Right.
You know, again, I spoke at the mental health court graduation just the other day. And one of the main things I talked about was we would rather help than hinder. I said that right in Judge Med's courtroom to the mental health graduations. And it's true. We would have rather help than hinder. And he could have tried to do that night. This isn't about those kids and necessarily the marijuana. This is about his actions and what he did to violate a state statute. And again, where we arrest others for the same thing. You know, again, it was a felony amount of marijuana. We don't have a whole lot of discretion with felony. But we could have probably done it in a way where, Sarge, you know, this is what I got. What about this? I'm going to do a report. We're going to submit it. You know, can we get our special investigations unit involved? You know, will they give us some statements? Maybe we can find out where it came from. There's some things that you can do. Doesn't mean they weren't going to be arrested, but just do the right thing.
Your ongoing investigation, the in-house investigation,
Yes.
you looking at potential criminal charges there too?
I can't say. It hasn't been presented to me as far as the report itself. So I know it's lengthy, and certainly when it's done, I'll read through it. I will talk to the investigators, and that's how we will come up with our next steps as far as action, if there's any.
So for the community, if he had done his job, what would be the worst case scenario for the kids? If you know.
Yeah, and remember too, the 19-year-old was the driver, and he was the one that admitted to having the marijuana. So although he's young and he's a teenager, he's an adult. And then the passenger was 17 years old. And again, you know, I don't want anyone to lose track of the idea that, you know, there's always a way that we can, or hopefully that we can talk things out, work things out, and get things done where we do the right thing and help others. You know, sometimes when somebody gets arrested, it doesn't mean we're not helping them. You know, especially if you're the juvenile, there's diversion. You know, certain things. If it's misdemeanor, we can do civil citations. It wasn't, but as an example.
Was your office looking into termination of Officer Butterfield before he resigned?
I'm sorry, the first part?
Was the department looking into termination before he resigned?
We were in the middle, again, we started as an internal investigation, and when we do that, it's potentially up to termination, where something that you see, a potential violation that's alleged, could be up to, including termination, could be a suspension, it could be a demotion, it could be termination. So we started the IA, and then when the body camera footage was revealed, and essentially it was disposed of, we also did a parallel with the criminal investigation in that regard. So we were in the midst and close to completing the criminal investigation when he resigned.
So is this his first time as an officer, or he worked as an officer before?
So essentially, yes. He worked for the Department of Corrections, Florida Department of Corrections, from June of 20 to April of 21 and resigned. He worked for Indian River County Sheriff's Office Corrections right after that, from April 21 to October 22 and resigned. And then he was with Orange County Fire Rescue 10/22 to 3/23 and resigned. And then he went into the police academy and was also working for Indian River Shores Public Safety when we hired him. So most of that was EMT firefighter type work and corrections prior to actual LE and arrest powers, if you will.
How long was he at the Shores?
I tried to gather that. He was there during 23, so he left Orange County March 3rd of 23, resigned. So between that time and us hiring him on October 9th, 2023, he was working for them and in the academy.
Did he resign from there, or was he
Yes,
from Indian River Shores?
yes.
The 19-year-old, will he face any charges?
No.
Any other kids in the car, will they face any charges?
No.
The body worn camera footage, is that something that will be released at a later time, once the
Yeah.
IA is done?
Yeah. Anything that, as you know, is public record, and if you request such, we'll get it to you.
Today?
Probably not, Greg. But thanks for
Wishful
asking.
thinking.
But thanks for asking.
Yeah, I
Is
was
that we
curious.
asked?
I didn't know if it was before or after the IA.
Yes.
No, he is, okay.
Did
You identified the driver
the driver and the passenger?
publicly, names?
No.
Are you going to?
Yeah, we will, and I can probably gather that, get you the 19-year-old. You know, the juvenile probably won't share that with you. There was no charge. We can get that to you.
Anything else you wanna tell us that we didn't ask you, that you want us to ask you?
How-
Keep
you
it
know what?
going.
Here's my last one. How do you arrest someone and then unarrest them? How does that conversation start? How is that done? 'Cause
Well,
he did it.
yeah, it's not something that's commonplace. It's not something that we talk about. But you know, you may have somebody, you know, in cuffs initially for some officer safety, and you may have something at hand, and it turns out, you know, different circumstances. But generally, once the cuffs are on, I mean, you're and that's what we talk about too with pinning of the badge. You know, we have that power and the authority to take someone's freedom away. So when we detain people, sometimes again it's for officer safety, and we're trying to find out what we have. But you know, 9 times out of 10, when you put cuffs on them, the intent is to do just that. And again, on the call for service report, he said detained, and then he said, you know, 10:15, which is under arrest.
Read the Miranda rights.
No.
No.
None of
Let me
that.
see if I understood. He got there first, then 2 officers got there, and at some point, the kid drove away their own car and just left?
No, he made a traffic stop because the car had passed him. He was at 20th Street and US 1, just finishing up another call for service. He was standing along the roadway with another officer. This vehicle, this Malibu, drives by. He smells the odor of marijuana. To another point, if he wasn't interested in making a marijuana arrest or investigation, he didn't necessarily even have to stop the vehicle. You know.
So the kids, the car was apprehended, the kids left, what happened?
No, they were allowed to go.
That's my question.
Okay, yeah.
We had 3 officers there, and then at some point they decided, no, you can
Yes,
go.
yes.
And the kids drove the car
Yes,
away.
yes, yes.
Are you looking at the other officers that were there that knew what?
Part of that same question, it's our internal end and side of the, I'm sorry, go- right?
What about the driver? Any potential charges coming based on this, or?
You know, what I think we owe it to ourselves is to, again, talk to the detective team, what have you. I can't say yes, there will be.
But the fact that he let them go and unarrested them,
Yeah,
does that end, I mean, can you still revisit?
it'd be
the original-
difficult probably for the state attorney to, you know, now we're going to go back and try to arrest again. You know, that's why, to your question, you know, you unarrest, and you know, it happens. I can't, but you know, once you unarrest, it's the chances of arresting again. You better have something, you know, convincing, and I think we clearly did there.
Even though the evidence is gone, you don't have evidence anymore.
Even though, and the evidence is gone, but we do have it clearly on body cam.
So if it's 19 grams instead of 27,
It's a misdemeanor.
and then the officer would have had the discretion.
He would have had some discretion, absolutely.
But he still would have had to
Yeah, again,
put it in evidence.
yeah, and put it in evidence. At least do a report. Again, talk to his supervisor. You know, he could have tried that route with this. Again, we don't have that much discretion with a felony, but I can tell you, I'd much rather go down that road and say, hey, I'm a few months on. I got hired in October. Never really been a law enforcement officer before. Let me call my supervisor over and ask him about it and run the whole scenario by him and say, hey, Sarge, this is what I'd like to do. What do you think? You know, well, we know you definitely got to do an offense report. You know, we got to have this evidence placed in property. You know, would we maybe try a warrant route? Because we, you know, that kind of thing. Much better than what transpired, clearly.
Do you know why he thought it was, I mean, he made the decision it was, you know what, you're a good kid, you're trying out. Did he say why he thought that in any way?
Yeah, and I, you know, we talk about the good kid stuff. I watched the video, and there was a lot of back and forth and a lot of like disrespect. I mean, it wasn't the best of traffic stops, and you'll hear it and see it yourself. I was concerned about, in all honesty, his conduct in this traffic stop and his professionalism. So you'll see it yourself.
So if somebody in the community asks you about the training of the officers, and from this case on, are you gonna retrain them, make sure they understand what was done wrong and what they have to do?
That's a lot of times, unfortunately, what, you know, we do some remedial, and we'll also, I do a letter monthly that's called the Chief's Chatter, and I put it out monthly, and I just do updates on who we're hiring, what's going on, you know, certain things we may be purchasing, events, birthdays, the whole 9 yards, and then I meet the shift with that letter every shift each month. In fact, I just met the shifts this month, and we actually talked about this and what we had. So we try to share and make sure that if there's something that took place, you know, we do training quite a bit. We'll talk about it. We'll talk about it as a shift. We'll talk about it as an agency, and maybe even individually, depending if it's, you know, 1 or 2, what have you. Because we certainly don't want something like this to happen again, and we don't expect it will. And it really hasn't too much in the past, you know.
You mentioned failed reports, a pattern of failed reports. How many times had he failed to file this report at the end of the shift?
Yeah, and that's part of what we're looking at, Nick, because again, when I say report, I'm not so, and I can't say for sure offense reports, but what I was referring to for the most part was when you make a traffic stop, we want our officers to, if it's a warning, it's a written warning, because then there's documentation. The person comes back and says, well, I wasn't happy with this, or why was this? We can have some documentation, even if it's a warning. So it seems like, and I made this, I gave you that statement because it was, in a sense, telling. I'll say it again. Let's see. At one point, I don't want to do this anymore. I just want to go have fun. So it seems like, unfortunately, that's what he wanted to do, was just make traffic stops and not have the work that goes with it.
Did either of the other
Unfortunate.
two officers question the decision to unarrest him?
That's part of our internal investigation.
And who were those officers, or was there a supervisor there?
It was officers, 2 officers.
Okay.
And again, he did call it was Friday night, we were dealing with a number of things, as you can imagine, on a busy Friday night around 1 a.m. But he did briefly call the sergeant, and again, nothing was mentioned about the marijuana. It's very brief. And that kind of piqued his interest as a sergeant too, because again, what he was kind of seeing up to that week or so, and then knowing he was on a stop for 44 minutes. That's a long traffic stop with nothing being done, essentially, at the end of the day.
Do you have any concerns about the fact that he threw the drugs in the dumpster?
Any concern?
In terms of the fact that it just,
Well, yeah, well,
any
and
dumpster diver could've
I
gone-
can tell you we searched it, Ray. I can tell you we searched it to no avail. So what happened, I think, and even with it was the city truck came by and picked up the
I mean,
dumpster and
fact
went.
that he just threw it in there where,
Yeah. Sure.
we have people
Yeah.
who,
Yeah, that was 2:04 a.m. in the morning, and and again, I think, and that's the other thing. Traffic stop was at 2:02. I go right to the dumpster. Right, I'm over on 2200 block of 16th Avenue. It's kind of over by the public library and the Baptist church, just outside of downtown, or really considered downtown. But at 2:02, I finished my traffic stop, and at 2:04, I'm at the dumpster. I didn't even think about it. I made a beeline right to the dumpster to throw that stuff out. Think of that.
Could there, I know that you said you guys are gonna look into what happened prior to this incident, if there was any other mishandlings. Could there be more charges ahead for this gentleman?
I don't think so. I don't think so, but I'm the adage, never say never. So we'll look at the total picture of things and go back some, but I don't think so.
When do you think the dumpster was dumped?
I'm not real sure. Shortly thereafter. That Monday, I believe it was. So this was 2:04 a.m. Saturday. They dumped it Monday, picked it up Monday, which he finished work at 6 a.m. Monday the 3rd.
And you guys went there.
We started the internal, that's when we learned of it, because the supervisor on Sunday reviewed the body cam and presented the information to the commander of our patrol division and our deputy chief, and then they got with me, and that's when we launched right away, essentially, we launched the internal investigation. We waited for him when he came back to work, because we were going to search the trunk of the vehicle when he came back to work, and to notice him for the internal, and we did just that, and we looked in the trunk, and of course, nothing was in the trunk.
And that's when you guys went to the dumpster.
No, we in reviewing the body cam footage, we spent one of our investigators spent several hours reviewing body cam. Because what I understand too is we have to turn our body cameras on, but they're always kind of running, if you will, and there's loops from before I'd make a traffic stop, there you could go back some, and after I make a traffic stop, you can go forward some. So we were able to, fortunately, it was still on the camera to find out when he dumped it, because we weren't sure where it was, and that's why we searched the trunk when he came back to work, and meanwhile he had not said anything. He didn't say anything that weekend, so we searched the trunk, and then we finally were able to. And kudos to the investigators to really, I think they spent 7 or 8 hours going through camera footage and finally found out what truly happened to it.
So he didn't tell you where he dumped it?
No, it didn't give us any statement, any information in that regard.
he started in October.
Yes,
You guys have probationary period,
yes, 1 year.
so he was still on probation.
Yes.
So you didn't even need cause if you wanted to fire him, right? I mean, that's.
No.
And for the driver and the passenger, were they ever officially under arrest? Because I know that you said that they got placed in handcuffs, but the
They allowed them to go on. They allowed them. They were unarrested and they went home, I assume, or wherever wherever they drove to. They let him go.
So at this point, Mr. Butterfield can go, what, to another department?
I would imagine probably not. With the arrest, and then we submit paperwork to FDLE as far as, resigned under investigation, arrested for this. Historically, I don't know that would allow him to do just that. But I guess we'll see. That'll be up to the Standards Commission.
Anything in his previous employment that indicates a pattern?
No, and I didn't recall any, but I actually went through his personnel file yesterday and looked at our because we do background investigations, talk to references, talk to neighbors, and nothing that really, and really stood out. But, going back to his work history too, the end of June 20 to April 21, not even a year, right? April 19th, 21 to October 22. And then with Orange County, 10/17/22 to 3/3/23. They didn't really spend a whole lot of time anywhere. And then even with the Shores while he was in the academy. So, and again, when we hire somebody, whether it's sworn or civilian, sit them down in the office and we talk about, giving them an offer and wanting them to succeed and glad they're here. We think you're going to be the right fit. And, 9 times out of 10, that really works out for us here. And so what I'm saying is that what we wanted was for him to succeed. And I say that, the two things I say, again, about the badge and what the badge means when you put it on your uniform, and remember that each and every day. But we also talk to the family members, and I make a pledge to them to train them and equip them and make sure we get them home safely too. So we're all in when we hire. And, unfortunately this took place, but this is, again, as I said, not a good time, not a good day. This isn't what we want. I know some of our officers, here form friendships and things like that, and they can continue to have them. So it's just not a good day for any of us, and especially the one that has to, at the end of the day, make the decision with the information that we have, and try to do the best and make the best decision for this agency, this organization, this city, and our community. And it's again, it's unfortunate.
Other than this, what you were looking into with the reports and not filing written warnings and whatnot, did he distinguish himself in a positive way while he was here?
Again, October hadn't been that long. He did make our CRT, our critical response team. When we had tryouts, we had several that tried out. He did make our team. But again, in talking to his supervisor, there were some things, again, what we alluded to and referred to with the documentation, that they were concerned with, and it was, in their words, she was kind of on the radar to keep an eye on that. And then that's why they ended up reviewing the body camera on Sunday, because if we didn't review it, we may not be standing here. And then what happens after that?
If he's found guilty, how much time he facing?
Not offhand, no. Obviously, felony, comes with potential prison time, but he's never been arrested before.
Did you consult the state attorney's office before?
Absolutely, absolutely. So again, we started with an IA. The hope is certainly not to have to parallel with a criminal investigation, but from what we gathered and from what he did, and again, a crime was committed. Please remember that anyone that we arrest people in our community for doing the same thing. You stop a car, they run, they eat the evidence, or they throw it, or they toss it, or whatever they do. The same thing, was done. And again, there's these points where, again, 2 minutes after the traffic stop, when he got here, he discarded it, things like that. So, yeah.
Good, we're good.
You sure?
Yeah.
Unless there's something else you want to do.
Yeah, no, I just wanna, actually, and, you know, I know it's several minutes here, but, and whether you'll, you know, place it or put it on your 30-second, this thing. But I wanna tell our officers and our employees here that, you know, and I've spoke to them, like I said, we meet and I meet, but I wanna tell them, you know, that we certainly support them or are behind them. You know, it's not always easy to make the decisions that we do, but that's why we're where we are. But at the end of the day, we are a team, we're family, and this is said all the time. This isn't anything I'm saying for the first time in front of all of you. And we have a great group of men and women here that do great work. And unfortunately, we had this situation, and a crime was committed and an arrest was made. But we certainly stand behind our men and women here. We support them. We're proud of them. We want them to succeed, and there's never been any time different. I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, appreciate it.
You're welcome.